Hundreds of thousands of women served in World War II, and tens of thousands of women trained at Fort Des Moines. Though we don't know all of their stories, there are a few that are worth sharing here today. The first is that of Betty Bandel. I'm standing next to pieces of the Betty Bandel collection. Betty was part of the very first WAC officer class here at Fort Des Moines, and because of her exceptional administrative skills, was chosen to be the assistant of Colonel Oveta Culp Hobby, who was in charge of all of the WACs. At Colonel Hobby's side, Betty Bandel traveled the world, visiting WAC bases and making sure that the troops were ready for whatever the needs were in that particular place. After the war, Betty used the GI Bill to ultimately get a PhD from Columbia and then serve as professor emeritus at the University of Vermont. Without her experience in the service, none of that would have been possible. Colonel Hobby finishes the war as the highest-ranking female officer in the United States military. She goes after the war back to Houston to run her husband's newspaper, but is called back to Washington, D.C. to serve President Eisenhower in one of the federal departments. Her service is so good that President Eisenhower genuinely requests that she run for President of the United States because he thinks so highly of her. A couple other women of note. Charity Adams Early is one of the black officers who graduates from Fort Des Moines in World War II. After her, she earns her commission. She stays at Fort Des Moines and trains other women how to be officers. She ultimately becomes a major, the highest rank possible, except for Colonel Hobby's rank, and is deployed overseas to oversee the 6th 888th Postal Division. It is the only all-female, all-black battalion dispatched overseas. Charity ends the war as the highest-ranking female black officer in the WACs and will end her career in the military after the war. She then spends the rest of her life serving on various boards and community functions in order to provide service until her death. The last person I want to mention is one who's not so familiar or famous. Her name is Edna Griffin. Edna serves at Fort Des Moines during World War II and comes back to Des Moines at the end of the war. One day, she and her family try and receive service at Katz's Drug Store in downtown Des Moines, and they are denied service because of their race. Edna leads boycotts and protests in Des Moines and ultimately takes her case to both civil and criminal trial, and she wins both of those cases. This case ultimately ends legal segregation in the state of Iowa, so businesses are not allowed to discriminate and deny service to people based on their race. In an interesting footnote, one of Edna's lawyers is Charles Howard, one of the African-American men who graduated from Fort Des Moines in 1917, who starts the Iowa Negro Bar Association that becomes the National Bar Association. And I think this tie-in of their story is interesting because both of these individuals, decades apart, served at Fort Des Moines. Both of these individuals, decades apart, are still providing that service to their community after the war, fighting for racial justice in Iowa and beyond. And today, if you come to downtown Des Moines, it is no longer Katz's Drug Store. It is now the Edna Griffin Building. And if you walk just a few blocks to the east, you will find a monument dedicated to the men like Charles Howard who started the Iowa Negro Bar Association. And so their legacy lives on here in Iowa and beyond.